Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas, events, and signature fundraisers to showcase how they positively transform communities of all kinds. I am your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I'm joined with a very special guest co-host.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lance Avery Morgan with Success with Style. Thrilled to Reese's Pieces to be here.
And today we are excited to interview Kara Newman. And Kara has just come out with two wonderful books. Basically, they're called The Cocktail Cabinet, and one is devoted to whiskey cocktails and one is devoted to gin cocktails. And it's a very interesting format of a book, and we're going to dive into that a little bit later on into the segment. But Kara comes with a wealth of knowledge in the spirits and wine world, and her expertise has led to multiple different books, and we're really excited to talk with her about her latest venture here with the Cocktail Cabinet. So with that, Kara, welcome, and we're so excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. So talk a little bit about where your passion and interest in custom and craft cocktails comes from.
Okay, well, sure. I am a longtime journalist, not a bartender, and I've been I feel like that's important to note. And I've been covering the spirits and bar industry for about a decade now, and it's been really interesting to see how the industry has blossomed and new cocktails have been created. And it's really just been a very exciting time to cover the industry.
So what about the industry has evolved over the last decade, and how has COVID impacted that? Because that's always, it's been about 5 years now. So like, how has that all kind of shifted in the decade you've been involved in the spirits world?
I mean, honestly, I feel like everything has changed. Just in the past, I mean, looking at pre-COVID, everything really was, I don't want to say new or reinvented, but a lot was new and reinvented. There were a lot of new people who came into the industry and really just reinvented what was once considered a very staid and not very fashionable, you know, cocktails were something maybe your parents drank, not you. And people came in and really just reinvigorated this entire concept of making speakeasies exciting, and new drinks were invented and old ones were resurrected and made better, and people riffed on them and took them even further. And it's just been exciting to see new craft distilleries, the entire craft distillery industry beginning and blooming, and see the bar industry reinventing itself. And now I would say in the wake of the pandemic, a lot more has changed. I think right now there's really this sense that people want to have fun and make up for lost time. And I'm seeing drinks that are, bigger and over the top and more interesting than ever before. There's a new generation of bartenders and consumers coming in. And I guess you also can't, I mean, I started in the financial industry before I came to write about food and drinks, and I always think about follow the money. So I can't help but also note that right now drinks are more expensive than ever before. And people are also drinking more moderately than ever before, which is great. I certainly support that. But there's also a sense that if you're going to go out and spend big bucks for a drink, and it might be only one drink, not only it better be good, but it better be memorable. So that's really, I think, the prevailing feeling right now.
Absolutely. I mean, you're based in New York. And
I
so,
am.
I mean, all across the country, $25, $30 cocktails are kind of the norm, which kind of blows me away because I'm old enough to remember happy hours of, $5 or $4 cocktails. And so I think to add to what you're saying about the specialness of it, people want to have an experience for sure.
They do. I mean, I remember before the pandemic, I thought of a $14 cocktail as being an affordable luxury. And now like $25 and more. I mean, the bar has to be set really high.
That's right. Well, speaking of which, there was a really great article, you probably saw it in the Times not too long ago, about how younger people who are on sort of starter salary incomes are choosing whether to go out Friday night or Saturday night. They can't do both, given the price of the cocktails. Are you seeing that a lot in New York as well? People are making choices like that.
Some are for sure. And definitely people are spending more selectively. And I think more people are also mixing drinks at home, to save money. Same thing as with dining budgets. More people are cooking at home.
That's right.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to something that you had said in your response earlier about, you starting in the financial services industry and winding up in journalism. So you probably have a really interesting path into becoming a best-selling author of cocktail books. So talk a little bit about that journey and kind of your morphing into, from the corporate world to the creative world to the publishing world.
Oh yeah, I took the long road to get here, to be sure. Let's see. I started writing about the financial industry and did that for, a number of years and actually really quite enjoyed it, was very interested in it, and developed a side interest in food and drink and culinary history, and just sort of started writing about it for fun, because that's what I do. Whenever I'm obsessed with something, that's how I process stuff, I write about it. And while I still had my corporate job, I started writing a cocktail column for Chili Pepper magazine, which
Oh,
is a real magazine. I started writing for them about food, doing things like salsa competitions and hot sauce taste tests. It was a lot of fun. And then one day my editor said to me, "Can you do a column on spicy spirits?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. I have no idea what I'm doing, but fake it till you make it."
sure.
And and that turned into my first book, Spice and Ice, about spicy cocktails.
And
And since yeah, and that was also right about the time I said, "You know what? I think I'd like to do this full time," and made the leap to do this as a full time writer. And now I've done 7 books in total, 7 cocktail books in total, and it's been a lot of fun. It's very different from the financial world, I'll say that.
No doubt.
I'll bet. Yeah, that's so funny. Well, tell us about, we getting back to the experience of cocktails and you writing about that. Also referring to another New York Times article about a bar in Brooklyn who is being very experimental in the way that they serve cocktails. And so, the certain glass, certain garnish and all that. And some of the customers have handed it back saying, nope, I don't want that fussy stuff. I don't need all that. I don't need the presentation. I want the experience, but I don't need the presentation. How do you feel about that? Because obviously you're an expert at presentation. You have beautiful illustrations in your book about the fine art of consuming alcohol and the experience of it. But so what do you say to people who don't want all the hullabaloo and want to bypass all that?
I say, look, it's your drink and you should have it however it makes you happy. I mean, for me, I say bring on the presentation, bring on all the hullabaloo. We consume with our eyes first. It's about the whole presentation. I want it to be beautiful. It's about seeing the drink. It's about lifting it and seeing what it smells like. And the garnishes are often functional. That twist of lemon provides, a bit of aroma before you even get to dip into the drink.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, I want all of it. Yeah, bring it all on.
Bring it all on.
Well, and
Okay.
speaking of bringing it all on, so tell us what motivated you to create the latest book, and we'll call it a duo, of the Cocktail Cabinet.
Okay. I mean, to be perfectly blunt, the cocktail decks were not my idea. The publisher, Smith Street Books, brought it to me, and they're an Australian company, and they brought together. It's so funny. I think of it as being kind of the largest footprint that we have an Australian publisher who brought together me, a New York-based writer, with the illustrator who's based in Italy. That's Giacomo Bagnara, such a musical name, Giacomo Bagnara. And his illustrations really just made the deck pop, really.
Well, I think that's really interesting. And I think what that showcases is that cocktail, it's really a global phenomenon because you're all on three continents in different days, literally most of the time. And it just goes to show kind of the broad worldwide appeal of these. And in the books, you've got 50 whiskey recipes and 50 gin recipes.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about the timeless appeal of whiskey and gin specifically and why they've just endured for such a long period of time.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Um, I personally think that, I mean, whiskey, one of the big appeals about whiskey is that there's just so much diversity to it. There's not just one type of whiskey. There's bourbon, rye, Scotch, Japanese whiskey, my personal favorite. And it's made in such a wide variety of places around the world. Just about every place makes whiskey, and it's made with such a wide variety of ingredients, and there's just so much nuance to it. And you might prefer a cocktail like, let's say, an old fashioned made with bourbon, which had made from corn, has a bit of natural sweetness to it, or maybe you prefer a Manhattan made with rye whiskey, which has a bit of natural spice from the rye grain. And I do firmly believe, by the way, that the quality of the whiskey you're using to mix your drink matters. If you're not starting with a good, doesn't have to be, great. It doesn't have to be expensive. If you're not starting with a good whiskey or gin or whatever your base spirit is, your cocktail's not going to be very good either. I do believe that. And thinking about gin, I mean, that's really the base of some of the most classic, timeless drinks, the martini, the Negroni, gin and tonic. I mean, gin really is the backbone for those drinks. And not everybody loves that piney juniper flavor that is the hallmark of gin. But these days there are so many different styles. I mean, you can have a citrus driven gin or a spice forward or a floral gin, and the pine can really be downplayed, but it's always part of it. But I think it's really just so important.
Awesome. My grandfather was a big fan of a slow gin fizz
Oh, that's a good one.
from Mexico, right? From down at the border when they'd fly down there for lunch, and that was in a different era. And he drank them until the day he died. I always like sort of put gin with like that much older crowd. And to a certain point, whiskey. I think we have Don Draper and Mad Men to sort of thank for bringing
Well,
that.
everyone had the old fashioned. Yeah.
Everyone drank an old fashioned, and and so I mean, really, dark liquor was kind of passe until that. I think. I mean, it just wasn't as highly coveted and become so masterful as it has, thanks to that, and obviously books like yours that make a big difference. There's the whiskey on the
Absolutely. And it's interesting to kind of see how things have evolved. What do you think, with whiskey, we kind of know it's kind of Mad Men kind of brought it
lid.
back. What do you think brought gin kind of back to the forefront? Because, when I turned 21, gin cocktails were not things that most people thought about. It was mostly vodka at that time. What has changed to kind of bring that back up to the forefront again?
I think it has a lot to do with the evolution of bar culture. I think when people really got into the whole speakeasy scene in I guess the mid to late aughts, I mean, that really brought back the the martini and different glass shapes. I mean, there's just a whole sense to all the different accoutrements that go with it. I mean, it's not just a martini glass anymore. It's also a coupe glass or a Nick and Nora glass. Who was drinking from a Nick and Nora glass
Good point.
until, and I love them. I honestly believe they make drinks taste better. There's just something about them.
Absolutely. It was funny you mentioned Nick and Nora. If you look at those old movies, those classic films, their drinks, their glasses were actually pretty small compared to what we see as these huge, sort of cosmopolitan, Sex and the City, large kind of
Fish
martini
bowls.
dish bowls. Yeah, fish bowls. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you look at like how much they consumed back then compared to what goes in. It's almost like half back then.
That's why the
Compared to,
three martini lunch wasn't as egregious as you might think.
that's
They were
right.
smaller.
One and a half. Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I'm glad you're bringing that up because I never thought about it in that context. I'm just like, gosh, if you have three martinis, you're just. I was like, how are these people standing? But yeah, when you look at vintage films, they are probably a half the size, maybe. So it's like you were having a one and a half martinis today,
Almost like a large
and
shot, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah. I mean, they really were. So it's really interesting to kind of
Yeah.
see how that's changed and kind of how that three martini lunch has is maybe different than what we had thought initially.
I'll tell you, mini drinks are coming back too. I mean, snack size daiquiris, little snackeries,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
mini martinis. You're going to see a lot more of these miniature, like almost shot size drinks, but still well crafted cocktails.
Interesting. But they're not going to be half the price, I have a feeling.
I think you're absolutely right. Yes.
The barkeeps are in it to make money, and I get it, with the price of everything going up like it has. So it's fascinating.
Well, speaking of all these cocktail types, I want to talk a little bit about the format of this book. And I know that you had mentioned, the publisher in Australia had, brought it to your attention. What is so cool about it is it's a box and I know we're audio only, but basically there's 50 individual cards. And basically what you've got is on one side you've got the recipe, and then on the other side you've got a beautiful illustration of what the end result is like. So talk a little bit about the concept of this, and I think we talked about this in the green room, of how you all came up with the loosely constructed book.
I love how it's like a deconstructed book in some ways. I like the serendipity of it that you can just sort of reach in and grab one and, just make one at random. And I also like that you can pull it out of the box and put it down flat on a table. I think one of the things that makes me crazy about drink books is that often they're very tightly bound and you open it, you have to like weight it down with other books or, a heavy bottle just to make it stay open while you finish your drink, finish making your drink.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think that you're onto something here because it's not only educational, it's also a party game, right? If I was a really good host, I would hand this to a guest and I'd say, all right, pick what you want and we'll make it happen. Hopefully I would have all the ingredients there to do it.
I've never seen anyone pull them out and shuffle them like a deck of cards, but that would be kind of fun to see somebody do that, or like spread them out at like the way you would at a casino and say, pick a card, any card.
Yeah. Well, they're so artful. The illustrations are so beautiful. They could all be kind of combined together in some sort of very artful installation. I mean, it's really stunning.
The illustrations really are wonderful. I mean, I have to give the illustrator props. I mean, I think that images really make or break any kind of food or drink project.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, Ina Garten is a national treasure. She was saying recently that when working with her editors, and by the way, these are beautifully written, which is your bailiwick, that with working with editors and copywriters, they really took her to task on specifics. Did you have that sort of experience when you were writing your cocktail recipes or researching them?
Um, I guess I mean the editors plural were very clear about making sure that the drinks could be followed, that they would be replicable. Um, the top editor made sure that we didn't put in anything too esoteric. And actually, since she's based in Australia, she actually brought some cocktails in Asia that weren't familiar to me, to my attention. Like
Mhm.
uh for the spritz deck, we put in an umeshu spritz, and umeshu is a plum wine from Japan. And I hadn't thought about that. Or she brought up an Australian drink called the strawberry bowler, and I wasn't familiar with a bowler style. I mean, it's in a big like goblet bowl looking vessel,
Okay. Huh.
and I don't know. I'm American. I didn't know anything about it, but drinks are global. They're everywhere. But
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. I would say that the editor definitely brought their own sensibilities to this project and definitely asked some hard questions, and the project is certainly better for it.
Sounds like a fun collaborative process for you all.
Well, absolutely. And talk a little bit, you mentioned like the different cultures. So like how was it like collaborating like with an illustrator that's European based and you being in the States and the
Mhm.
publisher being in Australia? Talk a little bit about, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to do any sort of collaboration, whether it's artistic or otherwise, with people from other cultures?
Oh, I mean, I guess just being open-minded is the most important takeaway. Um, to be honest, the way everything transpired was I would put together the recipes with advice from my editor, and then they would go to him, and he would do the illustrations based on that. And sometimes I would look at them and say, well, I've seen maybe we can change the color on this. There was one drink that I think was made with maybe it was green chartreuse, and it was supposed to be more of a greener tinge. And we sent that back to maybe be color adjusted. But I mean, in general, it's such a crazy collaborative process, and it went by so fast. I mean, it was really a very fast moving project.
How fun. Good for you. And what a neat challenge for you as well, journalistically.
It's been great to learn. I mean, it's nice to stretch in new directions. Not everything has to be a book. Things
Right.
can be smaller, bite sized. It's good to have audio projects like a podcast. I mean, there's just so many different ways to come at food and drinks.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And, I want to talk a little bit about, like what we were talking about, like shuffling the cards and all that, like, because you could really just kind of do anything with this book in terms of getting a good cocktail. But talk a little bit about how important a signature cocktail is in setting the tone for a good event.
I think it's important. I think it's nice to have rather than critical, but I think it's, when you do it right, I mean, it's a great way to reflect your aesthetic or show guests what's important to you. I mean, for example, I went to a wedding recently where the name of the signature cocktail was a mashup of the bride and groom's first names. And it was a vodka cocktail with cranberry and rosemary syrup. I mean, it was interesting to see, what they enjoy. And it was also a fun item to photograph and put on Instagram and remember the event by.
Absolutely. And, talk a little bit, let's dive into that a little bit more deeply. So, you had mentioned a bride and groom there with the, basically, it sounded like a cosmopolitan with a rosemary twist is kind of what that sounded like. But what advice would you give to someone looking to select a signature cocktail for an event?
Okay. Okay. I have a few thoughts on that. I think if you're going to select a drink, you want to make sure that it's executed well, and you want to make sure that your guests will enjoy it. Everybody receives a really good quality drink. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to pre-batch a drink. I'm a big fan of make sure that drinks are pre-made, because as a host, you shouldn't be stuck behind the bar mixing drinks unless it's something, of course, you truly enjoy. That's different. But you also want to make sure that it's foolproof, that guests aren't stuck with a drink that's too watery or too strong. And I think that pre-batching is a good way to accomplish that. I think it's also helpful to have a non-alcoholic version of the signature drink so everybody can enjoy. And I think it's also important to consider the aesthetics of the drink. Keep in mind what it'll look like. Okay, so here's an example of what not to do. Um, my friend, who is a very gifted hostess, threw a party this past weekend, and she created a signature. She created. She didn't create it. She served a drink that is her signature, the water lily, and it's in the gin deck, as a matter of fact, and it's made with gin, lemon juice, orange liqueur, and most importantly, creme de violette. And I say most importantly because when you make a single serve, it's a beautiful lavender color. And her approach was to batch it into a big punch bowl. And it looked like this enormous bowl of gray. And it was, I see you cringing. Yes, it,
Oh,
it was not pretty.
darn it. No one wants to drink gray anything, right?
Right. It was not appetizing. And it's such a shame because, it's a delicious drink, but, it was not right for serving in a punch bowl. So I guess that's kind of a cautionary tale.
Well, speaking of punch, which has ice, how important is ice to a cocktail? You hear a lot about, artisanal ice cubes, filtered water, all that sort of jazz. What do you think about that?
I think it's super important. I don't think it has to be um, filtered water, but I think for a punch, you want a big block of ice so it won't melt too quickly. It'll melt slowly, and preferably something that, again, looks nice in the bowl. I mean, you can freeze ice in like a bundt pan for kind of a rounded shape, or in a loaf pan for more of a squared off shape or rectangular shape. You can freeze um, berries in or citrus slices inside the ice, make it a little more attractive, colorful. There are a lot of ways to approach it. It doesn't have to be fancy, but you absolutely need a cocktail to be well chilled for sure.
Right, absolutely. That's fascinating.
Now, I'm glad we're kind of talking a little bit more about the intricacies and kind of the ways that you can use cocktails. So, I kind of want to, because I know you've been the spirits editor for the Wine Enthusiast for quite some time. So I kind of want to delve into that a little bit. First being, what is one way that you have seen a recipe from either one of these be successfully paired with food in some way, shape, or form? So talk a little bit about pairing a cocktail with food.
I'm going to deflect. I'm going to tell you instead about Megan Dorman, who she runs several successful bars here in New York. Dear Irving is her chain. the Raines Law Room. And her advice, I attended an event with her, and her advice, if you want to pair a cocktail with food, she said, right now you want a crowd pleaser, mini hot dogs. At her bar they sell like I would say like hotcakes, like hot dogs, or
Interesting.
or it's something that's certainly easy to have in a home setting, or their upscale versions you can have for a more elaborate event. It's something about I mean, it's not just that it's whimsical and fun and nostalgic, but there's also that very critical, it's a bit of fat and a bit of carbs, and it all comes together. There's a bit of acidity if you're serving it with mustard or ketchup or whatever. Those are important things for pairing with drinks.
Interesting.
That's
Wow.
interesting.
I love
That
that.
is the
I
last
would
thing
have
I was
thought that,
expecting
yeah.
you to say. Hot
I
dogs.
thought you were going to say, well, there's this very special kind of caviar that you can only be flown in from Switzerland or something, super high. But I love that. I love the high-low component of a craft cocktail and like a miniature hot dog. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think mixing high and low really does makes anything a little bit more fun. It makes everything feel a little bit more approachable, and high and low. Not that it makes it, maybe it does make it a little bit more egalitarian. I never thought about it that way, but it definitely does when you kind of bring all things to the table at once.
You're so right about high and low. I mean, that's why we're seeing so much, caviar scooped up with potato chips.
Right.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Sure, we've been to a wedding where that was mini caviar like orbs that were like personalized with a mini tube of Pringles.
Oh,
So
wow. That's
yeah,
adorable.
Yeah.
yeah.
And the Pringles were personalized too. So that was kind of
It
fun.
was really
Yeah.
really cool. And while we're on the subject of pairing, so I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially at business meals or something that's
Mhm.
multi-course, is sometimes people want to go from spirits to food or spirits to wine. What, as a spirits editor for Wine Enthusiasts, I think you're probably the most gifted and perfect person to ask this. What advice would you give to someone looking to serve wine alongside whiskey or gin cocktails, as part of an overall, beverage plan for, a specific meal or event?
If I'm being really honest, I would say, why does it have to be on the side? I would say mix them together. A lot of really important cocktail ingredients are wine based. Like I think of vermouth or sherry, and they can both be served on their own if you want to, but I think they're also great in drinks. Or you can even put both them together in a single drink, like the bamboo or the Adonis. That's literally just 50-50 vermouth and sherry. And I think it's one of the most perfect and low alcohol drinks.
That's good to know. Well, speaking of that, do you have a big collection of glasses and decanters and all that since you've been around this world for quite a while now?
I have a small collection. I
Okay.
am I am a New Yorker in a small New York City apartment, and I have a very small and well curated collection of, both bottles and barware. Something comes in, something else has to go out.
Gotcha. Understood. Well, that's cool. I kind of figured you would have an affinity for how, like we were discussing before, how things taste in a certain type of glass and the presentation.
Well, I'm actually glad you're doing that because especially for some younger listeners who may be living in a small space, what advice would you give in kind of collecting the right glasses so that whenever you do have friends over, you've got not necessarily something for every occasion, but you've got something that you can make work for just about any sort of occasion or drop in or anything like that.
I mean, I think you need two glass shapes, one with a stem and one without. So something with a stem like a martini or a coupe or a Nick and Nora. I'd probably go with a coupe if I could just do one. And actually for the cocktail card deck, I was told to refer to those as cocktail glasses and not to call out the individual shape unless it was, super important. Like a martini glass is a martini glass. It's a martini glass.
Yeah.
And the point of having that stemmed glass, of course, is to make sure you can hold it by the stem so the drink will stay cold for as long as possible and it won't be warmed by the warmth of your hand holding the drink. And then the other shape you would want to have is um, not stemmed, a rocks glass, an old fashioned glass. It could even be a water glass, but something that you would use to hold the drink with ice in the glass. And you want it to dilute a little bit. You want it to slowly dilute the drink, and it's okay if you're holding it in your hand. So your old fashioned goes in the old fashioned glass, and the martini goes in your stemmed cocktail glass, and then from there you can just build. Those are the basics, I would say.
Fantastic. Now, speaking of stemmed and stemless, so one time that you can serve both of those is brunch. So are there any go-to recipes in, in either one of these that you would recommend as a great brunch cocktail?
Let's see. Well, I'm not sure that it's in either of the decks. I mean, I always think of the mimosa and the Bellini as being the classics. Um, the the Pimm's cup is actually in a different deck coming soon, which I probably shouldn't even. The Spritz deck is going to be coming out in May. There's going to be a Spritz deck and a tequila deck. And in the Spritz deck, I sort of rediscovered the Pimm's cup. And I think that one's underrated
Very
for
much.
brunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one liqueur, Pim, so not too strong, although you could throw in gin and make it much stronger. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. But I also love that you can dress it up a bit with like cucumber slices or mint sprigs or berries and really make it very attractive and have a little something to nibble on as you drink too.
Yeah, I mean, it's still big in the Commonwealth, but thanks for bringing it back here to the US and hopefully with popularity this spring, starting a whole new resurgence of yet another, liquor trend. That's awesome.
I don't think I quite get all the credit. There's actually a bar in Brooklyn called Maison Premiere that
Huh?
serves, no joke, they've done 45 different iterations of Pim's cups.
Oh, come on. I didn't know
No
there
joke.
were four or five, much less 45.
They really just keep reinventing it over and over again, and each one's just better than the next.
Good for them. Oh, I think that's fun. Well, anyone who loves England like I do or London, I mean, it just really takes you back there. I mean, across the pond. It's just a very special beverage.
Absolutely. And so I know we're coming up on time, so I want to end with this with this one question for you, Kara, and that is, what is one thing all great cocktails have in common?
Balance. Balance. Not too strong, not too sweet, not too tart. I mean, I guess strength is subjective, not too strong to you. I would say that when you receive a great drink, whether that's at a bar or at an event, the thing that when you have a really great drink, two things make it great. And one is balance and the balance of what's in the glass. And the other is the warmth and the hospitality of the person giving it to you.
Sure. That makes sense.
Thank you so much for bringing that part up, because a lot of it is the energy of the person that is serving that cocktail. That really does contribute to the experience. So that's a brilliant answer. So thank you so much for sharing that.
No, my pleasure. I definitely think, it's all about the person is giving to you. I mean, you can drink at home alone. That's not the fun way to do it, but there's a reason we go out and we socialize with other people. And there's a reason why bartenders exist and why some are great. It's about what they're bringing to you and giving to you and sharing with you.
Absolutely.
And it's an exchange,
Yeah.
and I love that answer. Well, for your next book, you're going to have to come back on the show because we want to hear all about Pimm's and tequila, especially being Texas-based like we are. Everyone wants to know about tequila here. So, Kara, thank you enough. Thank you again. We can't thank you enough for taking the time today. This was a wonderful chat.
And congratulations on the books. These are so special, and everyone needs to run out and get them right away. And they're available for Christmas, obviously, perfect Christmas gifts or any occasion you get a host gift. How great would that be to give these as a host?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And for more information about Kara Newman and her books, The Cocktail Cabinet Gin and The Cocktail Cabinet Whiskey, please visit karanewman.com. And that will do it for this episode of Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli.
And I'm Lance Avery Morgan.
Reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.